What's going on, everybody? It's Ron Brown, LMT, the People's Fitness Professional, and we have Dr. Paul Dyer in the building. Dr. Paul Dyer leaves and comes back because something's going on with the sound. But hopefully, you guys like that last show. I'm pretty sure you had. You did like that last show. That last show was fire. We had a Seer Duke of Tears in the building. That was a great building on a lot of interesting subjects. And here we go. We got brother Dr. Paul Dyer back on. Let's see what's going on. There we go. You hear me?
Hey,
Hey,
boy,
what's
that
going on,
music
brother?
cuts me off. I hear you perfectly. How you
Okay,
doing?
great, man. Nice to see you, man. How you feel this evening?
Been doing good. Been doing good. Always keeping busy with trying to help people. Right. That's what I do. Whether it be taking phone calls or talking to people, or always getting asked about the science of things, especially when it comes to behavior.
Indeed. Now, today we're talking about the neuroscience of habits. Why do you what
Oh,
why you do what you do? Pardon me, I'm tired. Why do you do what you do? All right. The neuroscience of habits. So, all of us, we have like a programming that we follow every single day. We repeat it, we
mhm.
repeat it. And I wanted to talk about how does that work and how to break these programs. So if you can go into how does this work? These programs work. How does it how do we get into habits?
So, um, with this picture behind me is literally um, the center part, the basal ganglia is what it's called, and that controls thinking, movement, emotions, and memory. Right. So the reason why that's important to understand where it is in the brain that it's happening is because after that, we say it could take between eight. It's been studied between 18 days to 250 something days. You can form a habit. Some people can do it in 18. Some people can do it in 200, but roughly 18 days of consistently, you can form a habit depending on the person, and
Mm,
that's where it becomes because we have to understand how we learn, right? And we've talked about that on these shows about because of where we are, who we are, how we think, what we were taught is how we learn. Okay. That
mhm.
plays an important part on habits. So in layman's terms, you can almost say if you don't have if as an adult parent, if you don't have good habits, your child will never have good habits, because part of the learning as a person does is by watching, by listening.
Yes, sir.
Right? So when we talk about things like neuroplasticity, which is why we can change because we can grow different receptors and connectors for the neurons, right?
Mhm.
But the environment is a strong teacher. What you hear is a strong teacher. All those things that gets inputted into the basal ganglia creates a factor. So
Mhm.
that's why some people can never have a habit.
Mhm.
Some people can have, and we're not even talking about good or bad, right? That's relative, because if it works for you, it's a good habit for you. So good and bad is not what's a good habit, what's a bad habit. I'm not even going to talk about that because that's personal, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but we're just talking about habits. So you may not be able to learn a habit because of how you learned, who you are, what taught you, and what your environment was teaching you.
Right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the basal ganglia basically So
Yeah.
how does the basal ganglia get you used to pretty much anything, like form a habit?
Well, because so once you input it, like if you're doing something intentional, obviously like brushing your teeth, and you do it at a certain time, right? Those that information's always being fed into that area,
Oh,
which gives you, um, it releases different types of adrenalines, dopamine, and all this other stuff because it's the reward system. That's where your reward system is, right? We talked about um, the pleasure center of the brain. That's where this is, right? So it's the reward system. So I'm doing something, I'm getting used to it, I release all this. It's a reward system, which is why it forms a habit, but with with your thoughts of I want to clean my teeth. So it becomes an intentional purpose of why you're doing it, releases those other thoughts that goes through your body that let you form that habit.
okay. Check, check, check. Now, one thing I was saying to myself, and I believe I said this to my daughter and some other people. Uh, we got Mikey Fever in. Is that I want my children, like, first of all, both of my children, they're like, they do a lot, right? So one speaks Spanish and the other one's this and that. They do a lot of things. They're like wise and ahead of their time, right? But I want them to read a little bit more. And I said to
Mm-hmm.
myself, if they see me reading more, naturally they're gonna start reading more. So it's funny that you said that. So people pick up habits from their environment, from the people that they're most influenced by, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And and like I said, whether you want to form a habit or not, the people around you are going to give you their habits
Mm-hmm.
because
Mhm.
you're around them enough. If you're around them enough, they're going to give you your habit, whether it be talking over someone, whatever the habit is that you are familiar with,
Mhm.
that's what you're going to pick up. Now, you can also suggest and be like, I would like for you to read more. How about read this book with me? You can also be encouraging. That helps people form a habit. That's why trainers work, right? That's
Mhm.
why when people go to trainers or get taught something so they can be better at it, then with a different mental intention that I'm going to listen so I can gain physical, mental, emotional, whatever. That's why they go with the intention to listen so they can gain the the chemical releases that says, "Oh, I like this. I'm going to continue to do it," which we call as a habit.
Oh, got you.
Right. Got you. Got you.
Salute, Dr. Dyer. How you doing, brother? Can you hear
Hey,
me?
Mikey.
Good, man.
So now,
Yes.
so the neuroscience of habits. So we talked about the Bangla ganglia,
Basal.
pardon me, basal ganglia. So we talk about the basal
Yeah.
ganglia. What else in the brain deals with the habits, forming of habits?
Well, no, it doesn't. So basic goes because it's where it is. Then it gets sent to the cerebral cortex, which allows you to have those memories and conditions and stuff like that. So it goes to the fore part of your brain. So that's why things become actionable when people have a habit. It becomes because it's in the fore part of the brain. Um, but it gets all those information gets filtered through an emotional state because that's part of the brain that helps you develop emotions. So habits trigger something, it triggers something that you want to receive, going back to the reward system in the center part of the brain, what we call the pleasure center, which is why a habit is formed, good or bad. This is what I'm used to. i.e., he beats me. This is why I keep dating the same people. I don't know why, but you're it's addiction, bad addiction, good addiction, all those are the same words of habits. So whatever we are triggering, we receive, and we want to do that again. That's why habits are formed.
Wow.
Now, the other side of that is if you're not consciously knowing why you're forming a habit, you're it's almost like you're taking a gambling shoot saying 50% of this could be good, 50% is going to be bad, but you have no intention to it, so it runs you. You're not even part of it. You're not even part. You don't even have self.
So this is when we start talking about the unconscious mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, where would the unconscious mind be located? I think we spoke about this a while back.
Yeah.
We don't have. It's not. We have not located consciousness and where it is. It's. We don't have a place for it. We don't like it's over there. It's over there. No, that's what science. We don't have consciousness. That's why it's probably talked about in many different ways and how and what for, because it 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 it's a conversation of thinking, right?
It's a hypervisor, it's just a program that's just running on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay. All right. So now when you have a habit, like a strong habit, like let's say like smoking cigarettes is connected now, as you said, like connected to an emotion. Right now that emotion is I'm stressed and let me smoke something to make me feel more calm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now
Mm-hmm.
does
Right.
does the amygdala play any part in this?
Well, absolutely does, because now you're firing on where you derived, where did you develop this emotion to X, whatever that is, right?
Mhm.
So you mentioned smoking. Um, I watched my dad smoke. I really love my dad. He's like my hero. I also saw him smoke when he wasn't doing so well, when he was sad. He would go smoke over here. It was a different type of look the way he held the cigarette, right?
Mhm.
So when I'm sad, no, you're feeding all this into your creation of the thought, the emotion to smoking.
Mm. Okay. All right. So now how would you approach dealing with a client of yours who's addicted to smoking and he they want to stop? Would you take a look at the emotion? Would you focus on the emotion first?
I think
Triggers.
for me, it's all of it. Yeah, because triggers are everything. Triggers is what fires information between cell to cell, right? So you get from those triggers, right? Otherwise, they're going to just fire the same thing, and you're going to end up with the same fighting a chemical need to do something,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., we're talking about smoking, right?
Mm.
And so we have to break down. I will teach you
Mhm.
why the brain does what it does, because just knowing how to fix it isn't enough for me. I want you to be educated about yourself so when it breaks down, you could fix it again. Right? So me telling you about why the brain is just why the brain is, and then we can start asking those questions. Who created this for you? Did you create it? And if you did, how did you do it? Like, your building blocks, but if you come up with your answers, I don't know, this is just what I do, this is just how I learned it, then
Mhm.
someone created it for you, and figure out that connection there, and then understand it or break, and then you have a choice to break it or keep it.
After understanding it.
Right.
After understanding. Okay. So So now that you stop, let's say you stop. Also, another thing about smoking I realize is the taste,
Yeah.
the taste that your brain associates. You know,
Menthol.
like right. So it's like and also hand to mouth,
Yeah.
just that action.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cessation.
that could be. All those things can be interpreted. It just can, and then that you know I think interpretations can get a little bit wonky and sideways, and then things get out of hand because we're misinterpreting the interpretation and all this other stuff. But with all sensations, with all our senses, it affects why we do the habit we do. Whatever it is that the habit you have, it's all your senses involved in that, and how you created that attachment to doing it is your habit. That's why to change a habit, you have to rewire your thinking.
Mm.
And we had also add the chemical compound of nicotine, the external stimulant, that also alters.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But because you can smoke and never have a cigarette with nicotine in it, it's just straight tobacco.
Mhm.
So the taste of tobacco, and we call that now, really, it's a cigar when it's thick
Mhm.
enough, depending on the cigars, anyway. But
Yeah.
it's the taste. It's like having a coffee taste or a taste for Spanish rice, whatever. It's a taste. Is you enjoy the taste. The other stuff doesn't come with it. The nicotine and the other stuff that people put in the other stuff, yeah, that can cause total addiction and
Mhm.
yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Now, if you had to break down steps of forming a habit that happen in the brain, how would you break it down?
Like I said, it takes at least 18 days to form a habit, right? So you got to do something at least 18 days in a row at a time schedule before it kicks in. That's
Mhm.
the lowest, right?
Mhm.
Again, some people have taken up to 250 something days to form a habit.
Mhm.
So it's not just a time frame. It's the it's me teaching them the one thing is to have intent and then start to do something. If you have no intentions of personal intent, then it just being a good idea is not going to work.
It has to be pleasurable. You got to you know, push yourself to make it become pleasurable, as you said, with your intent. Because
Right. Right.
if not, it becomes hard work.
Now, now, would you say the human being is a let's say the human being is a sophisticated uh conglomeration of many different habits?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I think again, when you don't know who you are and why you do whatever it is you do, you may be a conglomerate, but you're a damage because you have no understanding of why you are and why you do things.
Right.
That's where that's where we're forcing you to think, and that's tough for people.
So if you had to ask someone,
Hmm.
who are you? When you ask that question, what kind of answers are you getting?
What do you mean? That's the first thing they come out of. What do you mean? And I said, that's very important that you said that because you have no clue. You're even asking me, what do I mean about who you are? You don't so your question already dictates you have no idea. So that's a beginning.
Now, what if I have a bunch of philosophical answers, would that work?
Mhm. Yeah, it does. Just ask yourself, like, why do I do this? And if you can't trace it back between something you created or something your environment taught you, and you don't know the difference, then it's hard for you to develop an intent because you may have never had intention. You may have never been taught how to develop intention.
Would you say the majority of the people are just walking without any idea of who they are?
Yeah, I believe they are. I really believe they don't know their intention or they've never been taught intention. And I'm not talking about the people who have been successful.
I
I'm not talking
like
about that
how you're
where
saying.
I
Yeah,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. No, I was getting ready to say I like how you're saying intention. Like I'm intentionally doing this for this particular reason, as opposed to just
Yep.
running on a treadmill.
Right. Right.
Intention,
A
purpose.
purpose.
Right.
Why do you walk at the speed you walk? What is your reason?
To get
Did
to my
you create
destination.
it?
Yep.
Yeah, but did you say if I walk at this speed, I move in this many distance in this much time? Did you calculate that yourself? Did you figure that out and say that's what your intentions are? Or did you just realize that other people walk fast, and if you walk fast, you'll get there faster, but you don't really know how fast unless you do it this many times? You see what I mean? Developing something is to have an idea why you're doing it. To go back to figure out even the habits you have now, was it something you developed or was it something that was taught to you? Either one could be good or bad. Like I said, this is not about good habits or bad habits. It's just how did you get to why do you do the things you do? Understand that about yourself. That's when I ask about when you ask someone, who are you? Do you understand your things? And that takes a lot of thought and questioning themselves because they're going to come across things bad. They're like, that's why I do that. Once you get there to that pinnacle, to that apex, you have a choice to continue or not. But if you never thought about your understanding of why it is that you do that, you never have a choice. So you're always just with the mob rules or what's emotionally driving you, right? You don't have a thought in it.
Oh man. Oh man, you're a puppet. You're a puppet in the what do they call it? For the puppet master. The puppet
Yeah,
master. Like I've noticed like even myself how I used to eat. Like it would be like, yeah, I'm eating healthy, I'm eating healthy, I'm eating healthy. But it's just packaged stuff that says it's healthy,
Mhm.
right?
right,
And
right,
so
right.
it's like, yeah, healthy, right? But then you turn it on the other side, it's a bunch of, it's like a 20 different ingredients.
Preservatives. No
Right,
value.
Right.
right. And then all of a sudden now
And,
I'm
and
having, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go
it's,
ahead.
it's your point is exactly. No one turns over the package.
Right. No one's turning over the package.
It
No
never
one's
comes up.
really no one's really assessing what they do before they do it. As they say in the 5% Nation, doing the knowledge. I wonder if anyone on the check-in right now who's from the 5% Nation, do you truly do the knowledge? I want to know that. Do you truly do the knowledge, right? Doing the knowledge, according to the definition from the 5% Nation, means to look, listen, observe, to know, and also respect, right? Look, listen, and observe. That's doing the knowledge before we call what we say the wisdom. Wisdom means to apply. Also, wisdom is the wise words. Think before you speak, think before you do. So, right now I've been doing a lot of doing the knowledge, and it's really working out in my favor because I'm like I said, like I was just eating, eating, eating. I'm like, yeah, I'm eating healthy. I'm working out, lifting weights. Yeah, 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 yeah. We're working out, running, 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 running. And
Right.
then
Right.
months later, I pop up with injury. The
Mm.
next month, I got a stomach. Something's going on with my stomach. The next month, my knee,
Right.
something happened
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just training and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just eating, but I'm not really putting any in-depth thought
Right.
behind everything that I'm doing. And now that I'm doing that, my life is changing and I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Changing my
Intention.
habits,
Intention
changing
is
my habits.
intention and thinking.
Exactly. Intention.
Yeah.
Indeed. So now, you said it takes us 18 days to 200 some odd days
Or
to
21,
change
right?
the habit. Being that we are a conglomeration, if you will, of a bunch of different habits, how do we
Yeah. Yeah.
how do we take a step back and chip away at those, what they say, rough edges, right? How do we chip
Right.
away
Right.
at those,
Mhm.
systematically chip away at those rough edges? And remember, also we're also dealing with strong passions and urges
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
maintain these habits. So how do we get past that part?
So it's a strong it's a s- it is a strong. You ask yourself the question: how do I do this? Why do I do it this way? Right?
Mhm.
Without That's it's the self-awareness, because now you're trying to figure out what's a good habit, what's a bad habit. That's probably an easier list to make, right? And you say, I
Mhm.
want to stop the bad habit. But when you're trying to stop a bad habit, you have to understand prior, what you call the red flags.
Mhm.
What's the trigger?
Yeah.
That trigger takes self-sensitivity of being
Mhm.
vulnerable to yourself, and how sad you're going to realize why you developed that habit.
Substituting. Yep.
Mhm.
That's something that the strong mind, because of social norms, has a hard time letting people do.
Mm. I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Dyer, about self-awareness and realizing the sensitivity. I'm gonna keep it real. I dealt with that with family, certain family members that I choose. Like once I address the situation and I see it's no longer changing, I had to learn to withdraw myself, control
Mhm.
the narrative, because I realized if I allow you to get to me, your words, your action, whatsoever, it's gonna lead me. I'm gonna allow
Mm-hmm.
you to lead me down a path.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you said that. It's self-awareness, knowing your sensitivity, knowing your, as we always say, your weaknesses. You gotta be honest with yourself.
Mhm. What's
Right.
funny about what you said,
Right.
Mike, is
Mhm.
that the people that you are allow, or not that you're allowing them to, you said that you're not allowing them to,
Yeah,
or
boundaries.
let's say if you would allow them to take you down that wrong path, guess what? They're a victim to their own bad habits, and now you are.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
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 And some people will they will do it to you if you allow them to. And as you
But my
said,
thing is, yeah,
consciously, subconsciously. They don't know. Because some of us were not raised with proper tools. Some of our parents thought
No,
they had it
but
figured. Yeah.
when you start getting the proper tools, and someone says you have to start listening, it's not
Mhm.
so much listening to what the outside volume is
Mhm.
to listen to what your inside volume is telling you, what you're
Exactly.
hearing.
Exactly.
That's listening.
Mhm.
When
so
you
now
want to listen, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry.
So when someone says, are they listening? They're listening to probably what I'm saying, but are they listening to the voice of how they're interpreting it, or what they're understanding about it?
That's
So
important.
it could be, instead of filtering it, it could be actually clear and clean, right? So listening is there's an equilibrium to this, the outside and the inside. And that's what listening is, because that's when you get to understanding.
Mm.
Because you understand how you are with yourself and what you heard.
Mm.
Now, when you're saying listening, are you talking about the inside voice? Now the inside voice, is that intuition?
It could be, it's genetics. It's a lot of history going on that's firing inside your development, where you are, how what's your family life, your surroundings. You're listening with all of that as a young person. And as you get older, which is why you make the change, you start to ask yourself, what I'm listening to externally, is it match with me internally, and is it good for me? So that's where all those different things are. Most people, it just matches with the internal because they're so used to hearing it. If you're used to hearing bad languages in your household, then of course it matches with what you do, because that's what your inside voice does too. But if you make a choice of saying, I don't want to use that, then you have to realize when it's being said, what's also being suggested to your inner voice, which fires the same chemical response that causes you to go back to do the same bad thing again. You have to make that hard switch, like Mikey said, and says, I'm removing myself from this because I know it's going to trigger all this different actions, which is going to make me create the habit I don't want to have.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
I can love you
Okay.
from a distance. Doesn't mean I hate you. I just like I know I take my family in dosages. Trust me. Like after a few hours, like all right, I'm out.
But that's why people have a hard. But that's why people have a hard time having a habit for themselves. They can go to someone, and someone can tell them what to do enough times, and they'll keep that habit.
Mhm.
I still think, you know, I don't like teaching people that way. I have never taught people that way. I actually will say, I'd rather for you to slow down on your gains now, so you can understand what I'm trying to tell you about your intentional connection to what you're doing. Even when I see, the problem is, like, I've worked with professional athletes, and their intentions are so purposeful, they get so much more out of it because they're mentally there, wanting to absorb everything you give them so they can be better.
Mhm.
Most people don't have intentions in their lives for something.
That's
They
deep.
just, it's just go to work, get a paycheck,
Call it
pay
a
the
day.
bills, go, going on vacation, you know.
That's it. That's
uh,
it.
Now, how would you find, like, people
Mhm.
like that? They don't have a purpose. So, like me, I was fortunate enough to find my purpose early on in my life, and uh, no matter what happened in life, I just could not stop doing the things that I'm doing right now, like this
Right.
martial
Right.
arts and all the other
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
that I do. So,
Mhm.
I feel like I found my purpose early. Now, what about those who feel like they don't have a purpose or even thought of having a purpose?
Mhm.
We have to, people around them, or loved ones, and people who, love, and you have to create an environment where people can feel like they can let go of their have tos to start imagining.
Yeah.
Once you start to become again vulnerable to sensation
It's true what he said. Imagination is important. Finding your purpose, man. Being
and
you.
sensitivities, your path.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But Dr.
And,
Paul
and
Dyer,
and I'm not talking about just something you're
Dr. Paul Dyer, you broke up.
Yeah, your phone froze up. Laptop froze.
You're back. Yeah, whatever. Your stuff broke up. So, can we start from the top from what you just said?
yeah. So when you develop a purpose and intention, you develop a passion for it. So, like I was saying, even when I work with athletes, pro athletes, their gains are so much better and faster because their intentions are there. So they receive it, they absorb it, and it takes. For a person who's living in an environment that they didn't create and they don't want to be in, their intentions is harder to develop because they're listening to all these other noises. It's
Mhm.
just it's just the environment itself. So you have to say, I'm going to do this. Now you open up a spot within your consciousness. So now your neural pathways can start reconnecting to form something that you are creating that's good for you. That's it.
Mhm.
But you have to develop that intention. Otherwise, it will nothing would ever seep through. No matter what information you are getting to try to be better,
Mhm.
you won't be able to absorb it because your intentions were not there.
Self-care, self-love, man. It's most important. Without that,
Indeed,
nothing.
indeed. So now, as far as the basal ganglia habits, the neuromuscular system, and movement, let's talk about that. And
Well,
forming a
because
habit with movement.
right,
So,
because
Mhm.
so when all this is getting triggered, your nervous system is also part of this mechanism that is happening. That's why when it comes to the basal ganglia movement, it's your nervous systems and all this. So yeah, so movement introduces can start formulating what you call what we know muscle memory. And that muscle memory has a voice inside of this is what we do and this is what we need to do well. So it starts to have its own, cellular voice to it. So like for me to get, your body's going for me to get better at this. So I'm going to send those signals back up to the brain. So that's how that is.
Mhm. Okay, okay. Now, in order to form a physical habit versus a, I, it sounds kind of crazy, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. But I think it's like kind of the same thing, but well, maybe not. So, to change your psychological habits versus your
Yeah.
physical habits, is that a
Yeah.
different thing?
Is it no, it's not a different thing. And it still takes about just the same time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But wouldn't you
You
say the
still got to
physical?
do something. You still got to do something because here's the difference, right? You tell someone to walk a mile every day at 3 o'clock. The person does it. Person A does it. Person B, you say, I want you to walk a mile every day at this time. Person B says, what type of walk do you want me to do? And what should I focus on? Because of that intentional action of what they want to get walking out of it, they're going to form those muscles that you tell them to look forward to. Their thigh muscles, the contraction of the calf as you spring off the toe, like keep your hips in line, keep your chest up. They're going to have a more more result than a person who's just like, you told me to walk every day, and they're just walking. That's the difference between that person will form a habit. Person A will form a habit probably in 60 days. Person B is going to form a habit like in 18 days.
So you're saying like the visualization and the and the deeper explanation, the descriptive piece gets the visualization. I would say in the psyche,
Well,
and then that's what makes it easier to form a habit.
Right.
That was your dog
Faster.
there.
Yeah.
That was. Oh, okay.
That
I've
makes
done
them
that approach
more
in
that make
school, like
yeah,
saying I'm gonna
that
graduate and just push through.
right. Right.
Yeah.
But that makes you form the habit faster. The other person probably will form a habit, but it'll take him it'll take that person a very long time.
Mm,
That's all.
okay. Okay. Now, as far as different types of habits, would you say there are different types of habits, or is just habit and that's that?
Yeah, habit to habit. Because morally, socially, however you want to start to impugn someone's perspectives and beliefs and faiths, who are we to say what's a good habit, what's a bad habit?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what you say is bad. So you're saying, Paul, if they do fentanyl, you can argue that that's a good habit. I'm saying it's their habit. It's going to kill them, not me. So it's not for me to judge this is a good habit, bad habit. It's bad for me. How about that?
Which brings me to my next question. Mike, do you have any questions? I have all the questions tonight.
No, go ahead, man.
Okay.
You hyper.
Okay. So now, uh, can you be addicted to negative thinking?
Absolutely. Because it triggers this, remember, it triggers the same chemical response your reward system is asking you for.
Wait, say that again. Can you rewind?
It's triggering the same chemical response that your reward system in the basal ganglia is asking for. It just knows that you can get the chemical I need to feel euphoric or whatever, is that we normally will do this or allow this. So how you're doing it, the brain doesn't care, because remember, it doesn't have real eyes and ears. It just has what the signals you're giving it.
Okay. So you can very much be addicted to negative thinking.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because it's a
But if you
feeling.
don't ask yourself why you're addicted, but if you never ask yourself why am I so attracted to negative thinking, if you never ask yourself that, you can never correct it, because you have no intention to change it.
You know, well, I'm gonna try this right now, and I'm gonna be transparent. I was addicted to negative thinking, negative, not necessarily negative self talks, because I don't say I'm a piece of crap or nothing like that, or I'm bad, or I don't like this about myself. I more so go, I'm the guy in the car with the road rage and the fuck you doing and beep beep, what are you doing? Get out, you all, look at that guy over there. He's acting crazy. He's stupid, And I realized that I'm actually talking to myself, because like my psychology is like my psyche, it's reading, it's picking all this stuff up, all these talks, all this information that I'm spewing out, and I'm recording this, and I'm creating a negative reality around myself. So um, I'm saying all that to say, like, how would you, if I know that I'm creating this negative reality surrounding myself, how do I continuously continue to break free of it and continuously break free of it, being that I've been thinking like this and having these talks for years?
You say, I am done. And then you start to learn how to be done. That's it. Because once you start saying, you know what, I don't want to be like this anymore, then you start reading, you start listening inside out. When I say listening, I mean inside out. So when people hear saying, Dr. Dyer wants to know if you're listening to what the outside is saying, and listening to what your self is, how you are interpreting to it, right? That's listening. So you start to listen, you start to inform, and then you start to change, because then you start to rewire your thinking. New neurons, this comes back to neuroplasticity. You start to reform different patterns, neural pathways of thinking, and that's how you change.
Mhm. What would you say about people who went through serious, catastrophic, traumatic events and they just can't get it out of their minds, and it keeps them in a loop. I created, I don't know if anyone else came out with this term, but in my mind, one day I say, oh shoot, we're caught in the like trauma loops. We're caught in like a trauma loop. So it's like, you have that trauma in the back of your head. You say something, you're like, oh, this person's that, this person's this and this person's that. Then you pick up your phone and then you start looking at, people fighting and things like that. You know what I'm saying? So, like, how do you get off of that,
You,
off of
you,
that? Mhm. Yeah, I'm listening.
you know, I was molested, and I was saying I was molested as a young boy. I could have went on with that trauma and kept it from me having to try to have meaningful connections with other men, as not as molesters, but how my connections were with women. If I kept that, I would have let it destroy anything of possibility of love that I could ever that I have received and would encounter. If I physically kept that saying this, right, all the time,
Mhm.
I made a choice and I didn't. The answer is you have to make a choice. And then this goes back to habits. Understand what you think and how you created your choice and why you're making it. That's intention. That's why people's lives change when they become intentional.
Okay. So let's say I'm your client. Something happened to me, let's say 20 years ago. I saw something that like put me in like a shell shock. All right. What would be
A
the
trigger.
first, right? What would be the first thing you would do to treat me?
Well, but let's say recognize that trigger, embrace that trigger, and tear that trigger apart. Like, why did you trigger me? Where did you originally come from? Interrogate that trigger.
Okay. So you know what? I'm gonna be transparent right now with the show before we cut out. My sister died years ago, right? So it happened out of nowhere. She was like everything to me. And she got on the back of a motorcycle and that was it. But the whole experience behind it with like, you know, her clothing with blood on it, my mom screaming like with this girdling kind of scream, and the whole scene, and like how do I unpack that? Like, you know what I mean? It's like I'm not stuck at the in that time, but that's a time that is so vivid. It feels like it just happened like an hour ago. And yeah. Mhm.
You're still grieving. You're talking about grieving, and there is no time limit for periods of types of grieving.
Mhm.
So there's you don't grieve. You may people may think you grieve less. You have more of a stronger senses to the period when you think of it, but you're grieving. That's not a habit to get over, because that's grieving. That's mourning. That's yes. That the motorcycles. Even seeing a motorcycle with a woman on a motorcycle, it makes me think of my sister. All those things are parts of grieving. and that won't go away. That's not something you stuck in. That's just something you're just grieving still through.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's so when it comes down to when it comes down to intentions, if you never asked me that questions, you would have thought it was a bad habit that you had to get over.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where you ask those questions, you get that clarity and understanding of, is this or is it this? That's what you go in with intention. That's why you were able to ask that question. That's why it's grieving. It's not a habit. So yeah. So it's able to be cleared up for you now.
Mm-hmm. I feel like getting on the motorcycle and riding a motorcycle would help kind of like me release this.
No, this is not something that releases. Like I said, this is grieving. This is not like a fear or something like that. If it goes into a fear, a habit can be formed, right?
Yeah, like I get paranoid.
Right now, that you can control with, you're right, getting on a motorcycle or doing those things, but you don't connect what it developed you to do maybe into a habit from grieving. And I think you hit on a great point then to say that often when people are sad, they take that as a grieving mourning period and they turn it into a habit of continuous sadness.
Right. Indeed, for sure. So in a nutshell, intention first, purpose, and forming new habits.
Yep.
And it takes, I think it said 18 to 200 some odd days. However, through visualization and practice, it may be shorter.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. There we go.
I mean, anything you consider to be the word learning is.
Indeed. And oh man, Mike, you just missed a therapy session, man.
No. I was listening. So I want to ask a question. I have a way of disconnecting from certain things, Dr. Dyer. Is that a bad habit right there? Like when things get chaotic, I tend to.
That's your habit. We'll end on that. No, that's your habit. It's your habit. It's what you want.
Yeah, I just disconnect completely.
You know what I mean? Good or bad, that's what you do.
Mm-hmm. I've been told I'm cold for doing that. Is that cold?
On that note, thank you for coming out this evening, Dr. Paul Dyer. We really appreciate you. And we are out in peace.